My name is Danielle. Standing on the balcony overlooking Portland's twinkling lights, I find myself lost in the moment. My little brother Ethan reaches up to hold both my hand and Mr. Harris's. Mr. Harris, a man who was once on the verge of giving up, squeezes our hands gently. I lean my head against his shoulder, and in this quiet moment, we share an understanding that words can't fully express. It all started when I was desperately trying to get Ethan back. I had lost count of how many doors I knocked on that week in Portland. I was in my early 20s, but the exhaustion in my eyes made me look much older. I carried a folder of documents, hoping they would convince someone to hire me. Each rejection felt like a heavy blow because it pushed me further away from my goal of getting Ethan back. Ethan and I grew up in a small town. Our parents were hard-working people. My father, Tom, was a mechanic. He was a man of few words but had a deep love for cars. He could listen to an engine and tell exactly what was wrong with it. He often said that machines were more straightforward than people. My mother, Lily, was a kind-hearted woman who worked as a nurse. She was always there to take care of us and make our home a warm place. When I was around 10 years old, I would often spend my weekends in my father's garage. While other kids were playing in parks, I was covered in motor oil, passing wrenches to my father. He would let me sit in the driver's seat of the old pickup, and although my legs barely reached the pedals, I learned the rhythm of shifting gears, the balance of braking, and the feel of the steering wheel. My father was always proud of me. He would tell the neighbors, "My daughter has a natural talent for driving. She feels the car like it's a part of her." Life was relatively stable and peaceful until a tragic event changed everything. When Ethan was born, my mother developed a sudden and unexpected complication during childbirth. I still remember the moment the doctor walked into the waiting room. My father's face crumbled as if the world had just fallen apart. From that day on, grief consumed him. He started drinking, and his once happy self became a shadow of his former self. He tried to be there for me and Ethan, but the pain was too much for him. One fateful night, he took the car and drove towards the cemetery. He never made it. The car crash ended his life and shattered our family. A week later, Child Protective Services, CPS, came. They said I couldn't provide stability for Ethan because I had no income, no adult supervision, and no way to take care of a baby. Ethan was taken into foster care, and I felt my world split open once again. In the empty house, I made a promise to myself that I would never drive again. The accident had taken too much from me, my mother, my father, and now my family. After that, I was constantly on the hunt for a job. Employers always saw me as a risk. They thought I was too young, too inexperienced, and too fragile. Some offered me part-time jobs with such low wages that they wouldn't even be considered reliable income. Others didn't even bother to give me an excuse, they just shook their heads before I could finish speaking. One early afternoon, I was exhausted. My feet ached, and my hope was as thin as paper. I ended up in downtown Portland, sitting on a cold metal bench near Pioneer Courthouse Square. I bought a cheap pastry from a street vendor, not because I was hungry, but to calm the growing panic in my chest. As I leaned back, my elbow hit something stiff. It was a folded newspaper. I usually wouldn't pay attention to it, but a bold headline in the classified section caught my eye: driver needed. Female applicants preferred. I almost dropped the pastry. Driving was the last thing I wanted to do. Ever since my father's accident, sitting behind the wheel felt like touching fire. But CPS didn't care about my past trauma. They only cared about stable income, working hours, and financial stability. This job, strange as it seemed, might actually meet their requirements. I stared at the words, and my pulse quickened. I could either walk away and keep searching or break the vow I had made. For Ethan, I knew I had no choice. The next morning, I took 2 buses to reach West Hills. The house I was looking for was behind a wrought iron gate, perched on a slope with a beautiful view of Portland below. It was a large, immaculate, and intimidating place, the kind I had only seen in magazines. I tightened my grip on my folder, reminding myself that I had nothing to lose. I expected another rejection. A housekeeper named Mrs. Jenkins answered the door and led me inside. Moments later, I found myself in a spacious living room as Mr. Harris wheeled towards me. He was in his late 40s, with sharp features and a composed look, but there was a heaviness in his eyes that suggested he had been through a lot. He told me he preferred a female driver because, in his experience, women drove more cautiously. I assured him that I could drive safely and smoothly. He took me outside to a polished black SUV in the driveway. My pulse quickened. It had been years since I last touched a steering wheel. But this was about Ethan, not my fear. I slid into the driver's seat and adjusted it with ease. The familiar smell of leather and engine oil brought back memories. When I started the engine, I instinctively noticed the weight distribution and said that the braking would need a softer touch. Mr. Harris was interested and asked me to continue. We took a slow drive through the winding hills. I navigated the curves with steady hands, avoided potholes, and maintained a perfect lane position. I talked about torque, balance, and responsiveness using the knowledge my father had taught me. For the first time in a long while, driving didn't feel like a wound, it felt like something I still understood. When we returned to the driveway, Mr. Harris said, "You're hired. Tell me what paperwork CPS needs. I'll take care of it." I was overjoyed. For the first time in months, hope felt real. With Mr. Harris's legal and financial support, I finally met all the requirements CPS had set. Stable income, consistent hours, proper housing, and the ability to provide daily care. When CPS called to confirm Ethan's release, I nearly dropped the phone. I rushed to the foster home, breathless and with shaking hands. When the door opened, Ethan stood there with a small backpack, his eyes wide and full of fear. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, as if he recognized something he had been hoping for, he ran into my arms and sobbed, "Are they going to take me away again?" I held him tightly and promised, "No, you're coming home with me." But the fear in his eyes remained. Back at my apartment, he was cautious, and every sound made him come back to my side. He refused to let go of my hand for more than a moment. The reunion was both a dream come true and a painful reminder of our separation. One evening, after settling Ethan with a blanket and a bowl of cereal, I drove to West Hills to update Mr. Harris. The house was unusually quiet. Mrs. Jenkins told me that Mr. Harris was shutting down again. Ever since the CPS process was over, he had stopped going to therapy, saying it was pointless. But the doctors thought he could recover more if he tried. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. He had helped me get Ethan back, and I couldn't let him fall apart. 2 days later, I returned to the house with updated employment documents. When I stepped inside, the house felt strange and still. Mrs. Jenkins whispered that Mr. Harris was with someone and that I should wait. As I approached the study to leave the documents outside the door, I heard voices. It was Mr. Harris and his estate attorney, Mr. Thompson. I heard Mr. Harris say, "I want the allocation finalized. If anything happens to me, I don't want loose ends." I also heard him say, "I have everything, except a reason to live." I was shocked. I knew he was struggling, but hearing it so plainly made me realize that he was preparing for the end. I rushed downstairs and told Mrs. Jenkins what I had heard. She said she was afraid of that. He had been slipping for months since his racing accident, which had taken his mobility. Mrs. Jenkins then told me that Mr. Harris's birthday was in 2 days. He never mentioned it because he hated reminders of the time he had lost. I couldn't just let him spend his birthday alone, feeling hopeless. I came up with a risky idea, to throw him a surprise birthday party. I knew there were high stakes. If he reacted badly, he could fire me, and I could lose Ethan's stability. But the thought of his hopelessness haunted me, and I decided to do it. Mrs. Jenkins and I started preparing. The next afternoon, I took Ethan to a toy store. He found a large model construction set, and his eyes lit up. He said, "Mr. Harris will like building this, and I can help." It was perfect. Back at the house, Mrs. Jenkins started cooking in secret. She moved quietly, making sure the sounds didn't reach Mr. Harris's room. On the evening of his birthday, the dining room was transformed. There were plates, silverware, and a small cake in the center of the table. 3 candles were waiting to be lit. The lights were off, and only the faint glow of the setting sun came through the curtains. Ethan and I stood in the shadows, our palms damp and our breaths shallow. Mrs. Jenkins went upstairs to get Mr. Harris. When he rolled into the room, he was irritated and confused. He snapped, "What is this? Why are the lights off? I told you I'd eat in my room tonight." But then, I flipped the switch, and the room was filled with warm light. I said, "Happy birthday." For a long time, there was a painful silence. Mr. Harris didn't smile or speak. I thought I had made a mistake. Then, Ethan broke away from my side and walked up to Mr. Harris. He held out a drawing and said, "I made this for you. It's a big car and you because Danielle says you like cars." Mr. Harris's fingers trembled as he took the paper. His eyes glistened, and he quickly wiped them. He said, "Very impressive." Then, he exhaled and said, "Well, we should at least have some cake." The tension in the room shattered. Ethan started chatting excitedly about the construction set. Mrs. Jenkins smiled with relief, and I felt my knees weaken. The birthday party changed everything. The next morning, Mr. Harris announced that he was resuming therapy. Over the next few weeks, he pushed himself with determination. He attended physical therapy 3 times a week, scheduled massage sessions, and tried to rebuild his old routine. But the biggest change was in Ethan. Mr. Harris bought him toys, trains, and model cars. He set aside time every day for Ethan's visits. Ethan thrived under Mr. Harris's care. He had always struggled with reading, but with Mr. Harris's patience, he started to make progress. One rainy evening, I walked into the living room and saw Ethan sitting on Mr. Harris's lap, tracing letters in a picture book. Mr. Harris was teaching him, and Ethan proudly repeated, "B is for book." Mr. Harris laughed and said, "Exactly." I leaned against the doorway, feeling a warm feeling in my chest. Then, one day, Ethan suddenly said, "Dad, can we?" He froze, his eyes wide, and he looked at me and Mr. Harris in fear. Mr. Harris was shocked at first, but then he said, "It's all right. You didn't do anything wrong." Later that afternoon, I found Mr. Harris standing near the bookshelf in his study. He was standing, not sitting in his wheelchair. He gestured for me to come in and said he wanted to talk to me about something important. He said he had been thinking about his life, the accident, and everything since his birthday. He wanted to truly live. He also said he wanted Ethan to start school fully prepared and that he wanted us to move in with him. He then mentioned that he had been considering becoming Ethan's co-guardian. To avoid legal issues, he suggested that we get married, purely for practical reasons. I was taken aback. I had secretly hoped for something like this, but I never thought he would say it. I whispered that I didn't want to say no. He asked, "Is that a yes?" I nodded, with tears in my eyes. The next month was a blur. We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse downtown. Ethan was there, looking proud in a tiny suit. There were no guests, no elaborate decorations, but it was perfect. Ethan adapted quickly to our new life. He followed Mr. Harris around the house, helping him with his exercises. Mr. Harris continued to regain his mobility. He walked short distances and only used the wheelchair when he was tired. Our evenings were filled with laughter and warmth. The house in West Hills, which was once cold and empty, became a home full of life. Now, standing on the balcony, I realize that our family is not built on bloodlines or tradition. It's built on survival, loss, and the courage to try again. It's a second chance at life, and I'm grateful for every moment.